Hi there. I just thought I'd put a few thoughts down on film about my recent trip to Berlin. Not the first time I've been there a few times, and every time you go, you find something different. It really is quite an amazing city. If you've never been there, it's well worth a visit, and judging by the crowds of tourists that were there over the last few days, it's a very, very popular city from people all over the world. Now, starting at the beginning, the new airport in Berlin opened up a couple of years ago. It's called Brandenburg Airport. It's about a mile and a half away from the old Schönefeld airfield, which was a temporary measure for a number of years. And it's a massive airport. Now, there are two terminals. Now, Aer Lingus and Ryanair fly into Terminal 1. There's at least 3 flights a day, maybe 4 flights a day from Dublin, so there's plenty of scope to get out there. Anyway, they fly into Terminal 1, and there's also Terminal 2, but that's only ever used for charter flights as far as I know. So it's a huge airport, and when you arrive, very simple, you pick up your bags, you go through the automated passport control, the one that takes your picture and stuff like that. And then you go downstairs into the basement of the station of the airport, and there is a S-Bahn train that brings you right into the centre of Berlin. Takes about an hour, maybe a bit less. Depends on, there's quite a number of stops, and obviously depending who gets on, the time that takes. You can pre-book a transport ticket in Berlin that covers all the trains and all the buses, and some boats as well. But although I don't know which boats actually, I didn't use any of the boats that are covered by that ticket. Costs about €12.50 to buy it online for 24 hours. I think it's slightly dearer when you buy it when you arrive. And but unlike England, a bit like Ireland here, there's no checking. There's no barriers at the train stations. There's spot checks on your ticket. That never actually happens that I've seen. Not all the time I've been there, but anyway, Murphy's Law being what it is, if you don't buy a ticket, you probably get caught. The transport system in Berlin is absolutely brilliant. It's second to none, I reckon, worldwide. You have S-Bahn and U-Bahn. S-Bahn is mostly overground, and U-Bahn, as the U stands for, is mostly underground. They share the same stations, and I think in all the time that I've been in Berlin, I've never waited more than 5, maybe occasionally 10 minutes for a train. They are everywhere. They're absolutely brilliant. Now, what do you do when you get there? If like me, you're very interested in the Second World War and the Cold War as well, which followed, you've so much choice to make here, what you go and see. I think a lot of people will make a beeline for the Jewish Memorial, which is built quite close to the Reichstag, and it was finished in 2005. Now, what this thing is 2,711 blocks of concrete or limestone or whatever, I don't know what stone they're made of, in straight lines, slightly off straight lines, and it's built that way to symbolise the vast scale of the genocide that took place during the Second World War and the anonymity of all the victims. And it's very disorientating, and it can be unsettling to go through it. Now, Berlin is a city of I don't know what word I'm using here, unusual similarities. When the Berlin Jewish Memorial was completed, they wanted to coat it with a sort of substance that wouldn't allow any graffiti, because graffiti is very, 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 very widespread in Berlin, and obviously they didn't want this memorial vandalized by graffiti, so they put out a contract to see who would supply the coating that we painted onto the stones to stop graffiti sticking to it. And they awarded the contract to the same company that made the Zyklon B gas that was used in the gas chambers during the war. Just think about that. I know it's not funny, but it's so ironic. And also on the site, when they were excavating the site for the Jewish Museum, they found a bunker. And it turns out the bunker belonged to Joseph Goebbels, who was the Minister for Propaganda during the war and one of the instigators of the final solution against the Jews. But that being said, it's a well worth a visit. And also is quite close to that is the Reichstag, the German Parliament building. This was the scene of the eventual collapse of Berlin in May 1945, when the Russians hoisted the hammer and sickle over the building in May 1945, in what's been generally described as a staged production. They actually took possession of the building the night before, but whether the light wasn't right or the photographer wasn't there, whatever, they redid it the next morning with the soldiers charging up and putting up the flag. One of the most famous pictures that was ever taken in World War II. And the Reichstag is the most visited Parliament building in the world. It's quite easy to get a ticket to go in and view it, to view the beautiful glass dome that was put up in 1989, designed by a British architect, Sir Norman Foster. It's one of the most visited tourist attractions in Berlin. And again, quite close to it is, you take a walk into the old East Berlin, and the guides will bring you to looks like a fairly nondescript apartment block, nice and modern. Because apparently what they did before the Berlin Wall came down, the Russians would build very, very nice modern apartments close to the west side of the city. So people look across, oh, they're doing very well. The further back into the east you went, the worse the housing became, and the buildings became more dilapidated. And in fact, that is still the case. If you're driving out the airport, Brandenburg Airport is actually in the old East Berlin, and you will see the difference when you're on the train going back out there. Anyway, you're standing in this car park, and the guide will say, well, do you realise where you are now? No. You're standing on the very spot where Hitler's body was burnt. And everyone just goes, what? And jumps up in the air. It's the bunker is sealed. It's underneath the car park of this apartment building. And the bunker has been sealed. It'll never be open again, because they're scared of neo-Nazi and right-wing agitators using it as a focal point for their activities. So that will never be opened up again. Now, the Berlin Wall, which was erected in 1961, for 28 years, it divided the city. There are still portions of it left, although most of it has been taken down. They reckon that during the 28 years that it was up, there was over 140 people killed trying to cross the wall. Now, I think that's the official figure. I say that in reality, the main figure was far more. But that's all they'd admit to. If you go to Potsdamer Platz and around the Brandenburg Gate, that was where the wall kind of was no man's land. That was the area you had to cross to get from east to west. And it was Potsdamer Platz now is quite amazing. It's full of new buildings, and it's hard to imagine that just 80 years ago it was a complete shambles. It was blown to bits. Because if you ever look at videos on YouTube that were taken around the time of the end of the war in 1945, you will see a city where there's not one building left intact. It's absolutely, the Allies have blitzed it. The Russians have pounded it with artillery on the way in, and it was absolutely, how anybody lived there is quite an achievement. It really was so badly damaged by, as I said, both the British and American Air Force and the Russians coming in from the east. And they've also come to a situation in Berlin where there's a lot of activity, protests. At the moment, there's a lot of protests happening between pro and anti-Israeli factions due to the war in Gaza Strip at the moment, which is quite unfortunate. And I suppose the thing we have to mention here is that both sides think they're right, and the police have to keep down the middle and try and keep them apart. There was a demonstration there yesterday when I was there now, and there was hundreds of police trying to keep the peace, which they did, in all fairness. What else? Shopping in Berlin is mainly high-end stores, a lot of high-end stores. Kurfürstendamm is the area to go for that. It's the site too of the old Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, which is a church that was badly bombed during the war. And what they've done is they've left it more or less the way it is. There are very few parts of Berlin that haven't been rebuilt. They've left this the way it is, just to show you what actually, as a memorial for what actually happened. in the city in 1945 and thereabouts. All form of mentioning Nazism or swastikas is completely banned in Germany now. They just don't want to know what happened in the past. They not they don't want to know. They just don't want it to reoccur. You know. There's a few little quirky things about Berlin that are very unusual. Like if you notice when you're standing at a pedestrian crossing, right, and it's on red. Now, what do we do here in Ireland? We just walk straight across the road because no problem, no car coming, no problem. In Berlin, they stand there. They might stand there for 5 minutes and the car mightn't pass because jaywalking is illegal in Germany. And jaywalking can result, if you're found doing it, in a fine. So they are so regimented. I mean, you'll see empty roads and maybe 50 people standing at the side of the road waiting to cross it, and they'll all wait till it goes green, then bang, straight across. I thought that was quite funny, you know. Now, also, food in Berlin, you've got all the usual suspects. On the economy scale, you've got KFC, you've got Burger King, McDonald's, they're all over the place. A lot of nice little German restaurants as well. If the menus are generally only in German though, so unless you're proficient in German, you might end up ordering the wrong thing. There's a lot of good few Chinese restaurants as well, Indian restaurants. And you'll also find that the main railway station called Hauptbahnhof is like a miniature shopping centre. See, unlike the rest of Europe or rest like us, Germany more or less closes down on a Sunday. You won't get the supermarket. You might get some shops, small shops open. You won't get the main shops open on a Sunday, except in the railway stations. So if you want to buy something on a Saturday on a Sunday, you go to the main railway stations. And the main railway station in Berlin is Hauptbahnhof. It is absolutely massive. It's like an airport. It really is. And there are other 2 or 3 other big stations like Ostbahnhof and that also cater for the trains. Ostbahnhof will cater for the trains going towards the Eastern Europe, whereas Hauptbahnhof is more for Germany and France, Belgium, Holland, that type of thing. Now, when you're going home, again, you've got your S9. You could take an Uber or a taxi out to the airport, but it's about 60 euros, I think. To do that, it's quite expensive. Whereas you can go on the train for a couple of euros. The airport is in Zone C, which is covered under that $12.50 for a ticket that I mentioned earlier on. Okay, so when you get to the airport, you go up into Terminal A. Now this is where it gets a bit confusing. There's Terminal A and Terminal B. There are some of the signs are quite frankly misleading. You arrive at the bottom of the stairs, it tells you Terminal 2 is upstairs. It's upstairs, all right, but it's 500 metres away. Whereas, luckily enough, we go from Terminal 1. Now, there, again, this is a word to Aer Lingus and probably Ryanair as well. Can you please ask them to put you in a gate that's a little bit closer to the security area? When you pass security, you will see a notice saying length of time it takes to walk to the gates. Now there's A, B, C and D gates. Aer Lingus last night flew from D10. D10 is 18 minutes walk from security. So bear that in mind if you're running late, don't leave it late, because this is an airport. As I said, it's massive. It's really underutilized at the minute. Like the number of flights is minimal compared to the size of it, and that will increase as time goes on. And also then you get to the D10, and it's quite a long taxi then for the actual takeoff. So our flight last night, the flight in from Dublin took 1 hour and 36 minutes. The flight back, because of headwinds, took 2 hours and 15. So there you go. Anyway, I'm going to put up a few videos, short videos of what I took in Berlin. Nothing too spectacular. You might see the Reichstag and the Brandenburg Gate and a couple of things like that. But if you're considering a city break, I really, really recommend Berlin. It is absolutely fabulous and not that expensive. Good morning from Berlin. Nice sunny August morning. As you can see, I'm at the Brandenburg Gate, which is a very, very popular tourist attraction. I'm about to do a 2-hour guided tour of the Second World War sites of Berlin and the Cold War. This was desolate until the bringing down of the wall in 1989. And you can just see in front of me there the Hotel Adlon, which is the famous hotel that Michael Jackson dangled the baby from so many years ago. And as you can see, it's a very, very popular area here. All new buildings now, very, very modern. And this was kind of no man's land during the time of the Berlin Wall. So I'm going to start the tour now, and I'll be doing little videos of the interesting places that we come across on that tour. We're now in front of the Reichstag. This is the building that's most synonymous with the end of the Berlin siege of 1945, when the Russian soldiers flew the hammer and sickle over the top of the building in what's always said to be a staged production. They actually took over the building the day before, but they waited until the next morning before they actually announced to the world that they'd done so. The building was restored, took up to 1973 to get it back to normal again. And in 1989, the glass dome, which you can see at the top there, which was designed by an English architect, I think Sir Norman Fowler, I think his name was installed around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So it's the most visited Parliament building in the world. You can freely get access to it to have a look around, and there are still graffiti on the wall put there by the Russian soldiers, which has been treated to make sure it doesn't fade, so people can see exactly what was written here back in May 1945. That is a queue of people waiting to get into the building. It's now, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning.